No buzz. A Just Bees book club. Mirrored Heavens. This is an arc, obviously. This book is not out yet. So forgive me any quotations I give. Book 3 in the Between Earth and Sky trilogy is, I think, the first thing I want to say, which is a thing that I feel is deeply true, is that this is an incredible fantasy trilogy. Between Earth and Sky is the best fantasy trilogy I've read since The Broken Earth. I haven't read a ton. I'm much more of a science fiction person than a fantasy person. Sorry, my glasses are. But I'm confident in saying that it's the best one I've read. I bet it's up there. I put fucking money down that it's better than Sarah Moss's shit or Rebecca Yarros or whatever. No disrespect to them, I haven't read them, but and on that level, like, I think you know, I think I will probably at some point be asked the question. I've read Sarah Moss's stuff, and I want to do a little bit more interesting, or I want to try a different kind of fantasy, and I will hopefully just have this in my back pocket to be like, if you want to read something more interesting than that is also going to give you the extremely well-paced and plot-oriented fiction that you'd like to read, go to Rebecca. Go to Rebecca Roanhorse. Like, come on, like, Black Sun. It still stands for me as one of the best fantasy novels I've read in quite a long time. I've talked about that, I think, at the top of last year, and then I talked about Fever the Star also, and my sort of feelings about how that became a book about putting pieces into place for a sort of final confrontation. And in many ways, Mirrored Heavens is that. Which I don't think is a bad thing, and I'm not trying to make it sound like a bad thing. Why are you accusing me of saying it's a bad thing? No, I think the series shifted away from the thing that I found so compelling in Black Sun, which, you know, among other things, I mean, it didn't shift away from all of them, right? The characterization is still fucking top notch. Sort of the final four people who appear in the end of this trilogy, and this is not all of them, obviously, but like there's been a lot of deaths across the thing. You know, Serapio, Shala, Naranpa, and Iktan are still extremely compelling characters, and Roanhorse does a fucking great job with them, both in terms of putting them through the experiences they go through and also talking about them in ways that engages with the shit they're going through, and also individuating them as characters ways. Like, I think her character work is sort of unimpeachable throughout this whole series, and I think you know, just speaking purely in the superlative, like, this fucking 600 page, the 600 page in again the ARC form, the advanced reader copy form book, the pacing just never stops, which is truly impressive. Like, it is so easy to fuck that up, and the fact that, like, I burned through this book in like 3 days, like this 600 page fantasy novel, a thing I'm not super compelled by most of the time, it speaks to not just rather, it specifically speaks to the fact that it is so well paced that I ended up being frustrated by it, right? Because I want that friction. I want to have things happening in the background that sort of drag the pacing away from the purely readable and make it something I want to like linger on. And I simply don't think that's the book this is. This is a book that involves, very important and impactful scenes and well written, mostly scenes of like coupling off. This is a book that ends this series by dealing with each person's interpersonal singular relationship, and it's beautiful in the way that it does it. But the thing I loved about Black Sun is that it had all of this, here. Let me read the very first thing that happens in this book, past the sort of dramatis personae and an epigram. Chapter 1, City of Tova, Year 1 of the Crow. On earth, in heaven, and within, 3 wars to lose, 3 wars to win. Cut the path, mark the days, turn the tides. 3 tasks before the season dies. Turn rotten fruit to flower, slay the god bride still unloved, press the sun to fell the sire. Victory then to the carrion king, who in winning loses everything. Attributed to Coyote Song. The first book, specifically, I think, does a phenomenal job of using those sort of chapter epigrams as world building. There are the Siuk portions. There is the I'm blanking on her name, but it's Serapio's mom, who shows up in here as well in these portions. But like, there are so many sort of moments that arc off like lightning into a million possibilities. And I don't think this book manages that. I think this book wraps up a trilogy. And that's not how a trilogy has to end. It's one way to end a trilogy. It's a really compelling way to end a trilogy. It's a really good, sort of heartwarming way to end a trilogy, right? But it's not how it has to be. It's not how it has been done in the past all the time. It's probably been done in the past most of the times and most successfully in many ways, but like, the possibility space keeps seeming to get narrow and narrower across these 3 books, and that translates to me liking them less, sort of as objects to think about or with or through, and more enjoying them as a fun little story that is doing things that I haven't seen in fantasy otherwise, that is like truly a great piece of writing on its own terms in some ways. But I don't know, it's been a couple weeks since I finished it. Has it been a couple weeks? It's been about a week since I finished it. A little less, and I find myself thinking like, that's good. That was good. That's a really well written trilogy. The pacing is so good. it it nails so many character beats. Uh, but it, for now at least, feels slightly frustrating because it felt in the first book like it might blow everything out of the water, and it didn't. And it doesn't need to, but it felt like it might, and that's where my sort of not it's not disappointment necessarily. It's my again because I had a really good time reading. I fucking devoured this book, um, but it's where my my critical apparatus fails me. I guess I can't think through that aspect of this book. Right, I can't compellingly talk about the ways in which writing a very good piece of fantasy fiction that sort of all converges in a compelling conclusion is anything other than okay. I read that. I'm glad I did, but like who cares what I'm glad about? Bees do. No, they don't. Bees explicitly don't. Bees explicitly don't care what I read. Um, I just Bees Book Club. Uh, I don't know. Yeah. Again, it's a thing I'm very glad to have read, and I'm very excited to recommend to people because I think people who have brains that care about sort of story and plot and um, things like resolution will get way more out of than I did because I wanted this to break things or illuminate them or uh, you know I think the real thing is bend the light around the thing, like not change the thing itself necessarily, not fundamentally change the genre. I don't necessarily care about that. If I see it happening, I'm excited, of course, but um, if I want refraction to happen, I want the light to hit things differently, and I think that was the promise I made up to myself about the first book, and it's not the promise that the books were making, and so there's a gap there. And I'm saying this out loud to acknowledge this gap, and I've been sort of like thinking through this, and I think this is as good a metaphor as I'm going to get to. But um, again, fucking Shiala, so good. Like the arc she goes through this book, the way it deeply reinforces her selfishness and also her deep connection to the world, to life. Um, the arc Serapio goes through, the arc Ictan goes through, deeply fucked. There's moments in this book where I like had physical reactions to things being described, which is not like how I engage with literature most of the time. Like, there's moments where like, um, it's great. Mirrored Heavens is great. Mirrored Heavens is great. It was also frustrating. And that's also partially because there that sort of like vaguely said this a second ago, but like the fact that it's paced so well that I wanted to just keep turning pages was part of the problem for me because there are so many broad ideas happening here, not like even abstract ideas, but like world building ideas, right? Like things happening within the world of this trilogy that are sort of always on the periphery that I think get alluded to very regularly throughout this book, but don't actually like sort of hit the screen in a way that like I am so happy to have things off screen, but like there were moments where it's just like just this scene needs to happen, like this scene needs to happen. Um, Here's your big spoiler before I go away. So thanks for not watching. Go away if you're gonna read this book. Um, or this trilogy, which you should, because it's great, because it's one of the best fucking fantasy series I've read in, you know, since Jemison. Like, and I don't say that lightly. Um, the title's Mirrored Heavens, right? There's a lot of talk about the way that the war on Earth is or the acts of Earth are simply a mirror of the acts of heaven. The god battle needed to be on screen at some point. It needed to be in the text. Like, I am happy to be wrong, but like it felt like a betrayal of the world building that like we only ever stuck with the people in the world and we didn't mirror out. And maybe in a handful of years I'll reread these and be like, this the dumbest bitch shit you've ever said, B. I hope I will. For real. Thanks for not watching.